Welcome to the Institute of Jewish Knowledge and Learning. Dr. Sandra Lilienthal providing a community address for 5781. Thank you, Dr. Lilienthal.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, IJKL. So when Kim asked me to speak about the year, the first thing that hit me is first of all, how difficult it is to say anything that we haven't said yet, right? We've all, thank God, been through several Rosh Hashanahs, several Yom Kippurs, and we know the drill. We know what people say. The rabbis always have a very similar drasha, sometimes more inspiring, sometimes more intellectual, but they always touch on the same topics. And I really didn't want to touch on the same topics. However, it is Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur will be upon us also. The second thing that I have been dealing with, and this is my personal struggle, but I believe that it represents the struggle of many, which is, this is not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is when we have people over, families together, all of those beautiful meals around the table. It's when we go to synagogue and we see people we haven't seen in literally a year, right? It's when we talk to our friends. It's when we gather together. It's when we celebrate together. And this is anything but that. And for many of us, the Zoom or the not using Zoom, depending on where you stand, is okay. But I can't say it feels like Rosh Hashanah. And so when I started thinking about what to talk about, it suddenly hit me that there is one overall word that I believe most of us, if not all, would use to describe how we feel in the last 7 months. And that is basically loneliness. COVID has really pushed us, in order to be able to protect ourselves, has pushed us to lock ourselves inside our own homes. We're at a point where we're weary of others. Those of us who like to be around others are now concerned, where was that person before? And could they have been exposed? And even long distance, social distancing doesn't really do it for some of us. We are afraid of going anywhere. We are afraid of exposing ourselves. And for some, because of this, loneliness means that we haven't been able to see our friends, that we haven't been able to see sometimes our extended family. Those grandparent and grandchild hugs, of which, God willing, I will soon know about, have been missing. Our social activities with friends have been basically inexistent. And yes, we all tell each other that thank God we have Zoom, we have FaceTime, we have WhatsApp, and all of these amazing technologies, because God knows what it would be without this. And while it is true that these technologies are amazing, connecting with people over virtual air comes nowhere close to being with those we love. Not for me, and not for anybody else. Attending an online class is extremely rewarding, especially when it gives us access to lecturers that live in different parts of the country or even different parts of the world. It's amazing. But the human interaction, being in the same classroom with other learners and with other mentors, is not happening. And this is the good situation, because then we have those that have no spouse or no child, and they live completely alone. And for the last 7 months, the sense of loneliness is almost unbearable. For many of these people who live alone, attending services at a synagogue was the opportunity to feel part of a community. But now, after having had a Seder all by themselves, many are facing the reality of having to be alone again for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah by yourself, Yom Kippur without Torah reading, without a community, just seems completely unreal. And even if you were able to go through all of the prayers by yourself, which, let's face it, most of us cannot do, it just doesn't feel like the real thing. For me, sitting at home, opening a machzor and reading all those prayers, I could do that on a Tuesday in March. It just doesn't feel like Yom Kippur is here or that Rosh Hashanah is here. So the sense of loneliness is very, very present and many times unbearable. So I want to focus my talk tonight on how teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah can change our lives, but not only in the traditional sense of it may avert a harsh decree, but also how these three things can be profoundly important to ameliorate our sense of loneliness. That's what I want to talk about. So, and unfortunately, I wish I could say, we don't have to worry about this. It's another week or two and this is done. Unfortunately, it seems that we're going to have a few more months, if not years, of this situation. So let's start with teshuvah. Teshuvah, as we know, is commonly translated as repentance, right? But in the Jewish way of seeing things, to repent means to actually return, go back to being the person that you were meant to be. And how do we know who we were meant to be? And why should we do this on Rosh Hashanah, dafka on Rosh Hashanah? Why I am not repenting another day of the year? What's so special about Rosh Hashanah? So my good friend and colleague, Yafa Epstein, who many of you know, says the following. Rosh Hashanah's liturgy contains the sentiment or the words that we repeat in the prayers, Hayom Harat Olam. Today, the world was born. And we usually conceptualize Rosh Hashanah as the first day of creation. And we teach kids it's the birthday of the earth, of the universe, when God created the world, etc. However, the truth is that according to rabbinic tradition, that's not true. Rosh Hashanah does not commemorate the creation of the world per se, but Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of humankind. Now, you might remember that humanity is created on the 6th day of creation. So technically speaking, the birthday of the world was the 25th day of the month of Elul. So there's a midrash, a rabbinic commentary called Leviticus Rabbah, where we are taught that the first day of the month of Tishrei, which we know as Rosh Hashanah, was actually the 6th day of creation, and therefore the day in which human beings were created. In that same midrash, the rabbis go on to poignantly describe the first day in the life of a human being. So they list in this midrash, hour by hour, the steps God had to take to create Adam. So we're fascinated, it's a fascinating midrash. We're taught that after God brings Adam into the Garden of Eden and tells him that he can eat of everything except for that one specific tree, of the tree of knowledge, it took Adam, the human being, exactly 1 hour from the hearing the commandment of what he could not eat to transgressing it. 1 hour, literally. So the text makes a very bold statement, in my opinion, right? Which is inherent in the creation of the human being is the certainty that he will make mistakes. Because if it didn't go 1 hour was what it took for Adam to disobey, and the disobey here means to do something he shouldn't have done, which I am calling a mistake, right? It's incredible, but it seems that it's ingrained. 1 hour and that happened. So unlike angels that are created by God as such, angels are perfect. Human beings are not created to be perfect. We are always going to have flaws. That is ingrained in who we are. That is the way God created us. So human imperfection is something that we can count on always. But as the Midrash moves on, it actually tells us that it took 1 hour only for God to forgive Adam. So here we have God creates humankind. And then at that point, 1 hour later, after being told he could not do something, Adam does it. And then 1 hour after that, he's actually forgiven by God. Now, what's interesting is that the text, the Midrash, finishes with God speaking to Adam. And in the Midrash, God says the following: "This is a sign for your children, just as you stood before me on this day," which was Rosh Hashanah, "and you were pardoned, so too your children will stand before me in judgment on this day, and they will be pardoned before me. So the message is very, very clear. Human beings are imperfect, human beings make mistakes, but yet they are also wired to be able to recognize their mistake and ask for forgiveness. That is part of the human experience. While God understands our humanity, we must still acknowledge our own mistakes. So it's not just God saying, okay, whatever, you're human, you're gonna make mistakes, I'm totally okay with that, that's how I created you. There is an expectation that we acknowledge our mistakes and that we stand in judgment. However, that process per se holds within it a guarantee of forgiveness on the part of the divine, which is something very, very, very strong. Not because it means that I can do whatever I want and then I get to shul a year later and say, okay, God, that's it, I made a mistake. But because if we stop and if we think and reflect on what we did, we know that no matter how bad it is, if we truly return to who we were meant to be, God's forgiveness will be a given. And note that teshuvah here is much, much more than just repenting and say, I'm sorry, and God forgiving us. It really talks about how we go back to a relationship with God. Each of us, not just collectively. So when I think about this, and I think about our reactions the last few months, right? Many of us have been upset, if not angry, with God. And we have asked the question, how can God let this happen? I mean, most of us are not simplistic enough, thank God, to come up with the answers that we have heard some very right-wing religious people from all different religions saying God is punishing the world because we didn't do A or we didn't do B, and this is a punishment of God. Most of us think that this is not the way things work, and yet we want to understand, why is God letting this happen? Something that is affecting the entire world and bringing us all down. So many lives lost, so many lives disrupted, people who do not have jobs, businesses closing, children that are not learning, and so much more. And yet, this year, maybe more than ever, we have questioned our relationship with God, and we are cautious in our interactions with the divine being that, at least apparently, has failed us. The problem is that when we see ourselves without God, without a higher energy, when I speak about God, I do not speak about an old man with a white beard sitting on a throne in heaven, right? When we do not have God, then who are we and what are we? If we are separated from that source that created us, what are we supposed to do? If we feel lonely and we cannot invite anyone over, which is what we are all going through right now, then this year especially, it's important to remember that the remedy is God, because God can come in, and all we have to do is open our doors. Many of us are familiar with the story about the footprints in the sand. So I'm not going to read the whole story. It's a poem. It's a beautiful poem. But the story is about this person that is dreaming. And as he looks, he's walking on a beach, and he looks down and he sees two sets of steps. And all of the scenes of his life are going through his dream. And he sees that every scene, he looks down and he sees two sets of footprints in the sand. One belongs to him, one belongs to God. And then after the last scene of his life, he looks back at the footprints in the sand and notices that in certain times throughout his life, there was only one set of footprints. And he realizes that those are the worst times in his life, the times where he was sad, where he was lonely, where he needed something, and he's really troubled about it. And in his dream, he asks God, well, you said that if I followed you, God, you would always be with me. But I'm looking down and I'm looking at the footprints in the sand, and what I see is that in the most difficult parts of my life, at the most difficult times, you weren't there. There's only one set of footprints. I don't understand. Where were you when I needed you most? To which God responds, I have never left you alone. I love you, and never, ever, especially during your trials and your tests, did I leave you alone. When you see only one set of footprints, it's because I was carrying you. And I believe this is such a powerful message that even when we think, when we in our life feel that there are times that God isn't there, that God is removed, that's really not true. God's never removed from us. And the reason why God is never removed from us is because we all have God inside of us. We are all little sparks of the divine, sparks of godliness. So God can't be removed from us. We may not be seeing God, but God's there. So this year, maybe more than any other year, we must take this opportunity, not only on Rosh Hashanah, but throughout the entire year that starts tomorrow night, whether we are in synagogue or at home, via Zoom with friends or alone. This is the time when we have to remind ourselves that at the darkest times of our lives, one of the certainties we have is, as we said before, man as in humankind, man is going to fail. The other certainty we have is that God is never going to leave us alone. He is always with us. We are not alone. God's outside the door, just waiting for us to allow him in. And the same thing can be said about all of the human beings that we might have inadvertently upset or hurt. Too many of us live with very complicated family histories. Human relationships are difficult. We all know people in our own families or in other families who don't talk to their parents, or parents who don't talk to their child, or terrible divorces where the parents don't speak and then the kids don't know what to do. I mean, there's so much out there that is broken. We have a chance this time of the year, because this is the way God created the world, that at this time, that's the energy, the astronomical energy that allows us to open that door again to all of those broken relationships. God asks us to realize that we made mistakes. We do. That's part of being human. We all know that. God knows it too. But we can repent and we can ask for forgiveness. We can say to our friends, let's do things differently this time. We can say to God, we really are here today as this new year begins to renew our relationship. We don't want it to be the same as it was last year. We want this relationship to be different. We're lonely, and the only certainty we have is that God is there with us. So let's try, as the year begins, to reinforce that relationship with the divine, to try to bring the divine closer to us and to elevate us in a way that we get closer to God. That's teshuvah. Now let's talk about tefillah. So prayer, I believe, is one of the most misunderstood ways of relating to God, because we all think that, okay, prayer is the way I talk to God. Yes and no. So this is not a class on prayer. I'm just going to give you the punchline. If prayer is us talking to God, then unless you're really talking to God, you're not praying. And what I mean by this is the following. If you open a Siddur or on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, a Machzor, and you're reading all of the words that are in that book very, very carefully, you are fulfilling the mitzvah, the commandment to pray. I'm not sure you're talking to God. It's not your words. That to me is one of the things that we need to work on this year as well. The verb to pray in Hebrew, and many of you have heard me say this already, is a reflexive verb, lehitpalel, which means that prayer is not just I'm talking to God. Prayer is something that I'm doing to myself. Now, what am I doing to myself when I'm talking to God? So according to Jewish tradition, we have to hear our own words, because if not, we can't really know what we need, And if we don't know what we need, we can't work in order to achieve the goals that we have in mind. So when you think about this, if you're going to a job interview, or if you're going on a first date, we spend a lot of time before going to the interview or to the first date thinking, what am I going to say? How am I going to present myself? What are my strengths? What are the things I should tell them? What are the questions I should ask of them? We reflect on all of this before we get there. The person on the other side will only know that which we tell them about us, or those things that we ask them about. So why is it that when we prepare to encounter God, who, let's face it, is quite more important than a job interview, we do so little preparation? On the other hand, one could say, well, but if there's a job interview or a first date, the person on the other side doesn't know anything about me. So of course, I need to go to that person and tell the person who I am, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what I expect to see, etc. But if it's God, why do I need to tell God what I need? If God is God, then God knows what I need. I don't have to say anything. And now I want to remind you of those many times when you, either in the position of being the child or the position of being the parent, right, see a child walking up to you and you know exactly, the parent knows exactly what the child wants. We all do. And yet, the parent says, what do you want? Or the parent says, can you please use your words to tell me what it is that you want? Now, why do we do this? If I'm a parent, I know what my child wants. Why am I going through this craziness of asking them to tell me in their own words what they want? But the truth is, we want to teach children that it is very important for them to identify their needs. And that identifying needs and being able to communicate them is a fundamental part of being human. So after you tell me in your words what it is that you want, I'll be more than happy to help you. So with prayer, it is very similar. We need to learn how to use our own words. Besides the words of printed books, we need to reflect and organize our thoughts before we're ready to tell God what our problems are, what we need help with, and what we are thankful for. That takes time. That takes preparation. And I think this is something we should also add to our lives in this year to come, that before I get together with God, whether I speak to God daily, whether I speak to God once a week, whether I speak to God once a month or once a year, whether I speak to God every day on the same time, or whether I speak to God only when I have something to say. Some of you have heard me say that the most profound prayers that I have uttered are prayers, for example, thank you so much for that green light, I was running late. Now that seems completely trivial and ridiculous, but you know what? That's really what I'm thankful for. That's what I wanted to say to God. I needed that green light and you made it happen. Do I know if God made the light happen? No, but it's something that I needed and happened, and so I'm thankful, and I tell God, oh, thank you, right? That to me is more of a prayer than many of the words that we read from books. There's also another thing. When you are reading words from a machzor, that is not coming from deep inside of you. That cry, that raw cry that comes from within, that comes with tears, is not what we get out of a printed book. So there's an interesting story told about a famous Gerer Rebbe, one of these old Rebbes of a Hasidic group, who before Rosh Hashanah had received a letter from one of his Hasidim, and the letter basically said, Rebbe, I need to know, please tell me, which is the most important prayer on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So he wanted to know, of all of the prayers, which is the most important one? To which the Gerer Rebbe then responded to him, look, the truth is, I'm really busy. I have tons of letters to respond to, and I don't even have time to respond to, and I wouldn't even think of answering yours because it's not really that deep of a question. He says, but the reason I'm answering your letter is because I saw that your letter was wet with tears. And he said, at that minute, I knew that I had to stop everything and answer your letter. And then he says, and by the way, please know the answer to your question is that every prayer is equally important. Every prayer reaches heaven. And the heavens are always open to your words, especially this time of the year. So again, there's another Hasidic story, which many of you might have heard about the little boy who's a shepherd. He doesn't know how to pray. And then he passes in front of a synagogue and he hears beautiful davening, beautiful prayer inside the synagogue. And he walks in. He comes in, he sees everybody praying and he wants to join them. But this little boy doesn't know how to read. So he can't take a siddur and he can't pray with them. He doesn't know the prayers by heart. He doesn't know how to read. The only thing that he knows is the Aleph Bet. And so he sits in the back of the synagogue, and while people are praying, you know, those very serious prayers, he's just going, Aleph, Bet, and everybody is profoundly disturbed that instead of, keep quiet, if you don't know how to pray, just shut up. Why are you disturbing this? And the boy just is singing loud, and the letters one by one. And then two gentlemen get really upset and go take him out of the synagogue and say to him, you know, you have to leave. And the rabbi runs to them and says, please, please, please don't do that. And the rabbi says, it is that boy's shouting of the letters that actually have opened the heavens, and God is now hearing us. None of our prayers were able to open the heavens, but his prayer was, because his prayer was coming from his heart. The point of the story is that prayer counts when you are being sincere, when it's coming from deep inside. That little boy wanted to talk to God, and all he could do is say the letters. Any kind of relationship between two people or between a human being and God is built on communication, and we all know that. And communication, according to King David in Psalms, has to come from the heart. You might know this verse from Ashrei. It says, Karov Hashem lehol korav lehor asher yekrahu be'emet. God is close to all who call him, to all who call with sincerity. So tefillah, prayer, really has two purposes for us. The first is that, like the shepherd boy, we should be able to learn how to collect our thoughts, tell God what we need in the way that we know how to put it. Whether those are the words that we traditionally say or not, God can understand us. Or as one of the versions of this Hasidic story says, is that the rabbi says to the people who wanted the boy out, God knows how to put the letters together and turn them into words. So too often, we concentrate on everything that is going wrong in our lives. That's just human nature. We complain about how difficult it is to make a living. We fail to thank God for the things that we have. Even if it's difficult, we have a job, we have a boss, we have, you know, a land and food to eat, etc. As we're getting close to Rosh Hashanah and we examine how the year went, I urge you to contemplate on all of the hard times that we have been going through, for sure. But also, look at the good things that happened this year. We all have good things that happened to us this year. We face challenges, there's no question. There are times when we feel that we are backed into a corner and that we can't escape. Some of us have a tendency to think that our problems are insurmountable, and we end up despairing. There's another Hasidic story of a man who once went to the Rebbe, and apparently the story is told about a Chebener Rebbe, but whatever. He has a terrible problem. He tells the Rebbe, I don't know how to go on with life. So the Rebbe tells him a story and says, look, let me share something with you. And he says, the story that I'm going to tell you happened the night before Yom Kippur. Now, traditionally speaking, the night before Yom Kippur, some Jews do what is called kaparot, kaporas. They have to hold a chicken in their hand, and the chicken is waved above their heads, and they have to say a prayer. So here's this man, and he has the chicken in a hand, the siddur in the other hand so that he can pray. And as he's swinging the chicken over his head, his glasses fell off. Now, at that point, he doesn't know what to do. And it seems funny, but just imagine the scene. He says, I can't put down the chicken to pick up the glasses, because if I put down the chicken, obviously the chicken is going to run away. I can't put a siddur down. You're not allowed to put a siddur on the floor. So, and I can't see without my glasses. So now I don't know what to do. And I'm here desperate, and the Rebbe is telling the story to the man who was complaining. And he says, and you know, if he doesn't take the glasses, he can't read the siddur. If he puts the siddur down, then he's committing a sin. He can't put the chicken down, and it's terrible. And he doesn't know what to do. So the man that had come to the Rebbe says, and what did he do? And the Rebbe answers him and says, I don't know what he did, but I can guarantee you that he isn't standing there anymore. And the Rebbe then completes his thought and says to the man, every problem has a solution. Change your attitude and you'll figure out what to do. Tefillah changes our decree, because as we hear ourselves, as we are able to put our feelings and our needs and our thanks into words, we know what we need to do. And if we know what we need to do, we can start doing it, but not until we are aware of what it is that is really important to us and what it is that we really need. This year, I think tefillah has an added level. It reminds us once again that we are never alone, because God is there. God is ready for us to go to him and in our own words say, we need your help. I'm going to put a video up if my technology works. Many of you know this song, and I want you to pay attention to the words. It's a song in Hebrew. The words are in English, translated and transliterated in the video. And I will say right now that there are many versions of this song. I purposely chose this recording, which is a live recording. It's basically talking about God hearing us when our heart really cries out. So let me see if this works. Give me a second to share my screen, and hopefully, here we go.
כשהלב בוכה רק אלוקים, הכאב עולה מתוך הנשמה, אדם נופל לפני שהוא שוקע, בתפילה קטנה חותכת הדממה. שמע נתת לי את חיי, בעיניי דמעה, הלב בוכה בשקט, וכשהלב שותק, הנשמה זועקת. שמע ישראל אלוקיי, עכשיו אני אותי אלוקיי, עשה שלא אבחר. הכאב גדול ואין לאן לברוח, עשה שיגמר כי לא נותר בי כוח. כשהלב בוכה הזמן עומד מלכת, האדם רואה את כל חייו פתאום אל הלא נודע, הוא לא רוצה ללכת, לאלוקיו קורא על סף תהום. שמע ישראל אלוקיי, אתה כל יכול. נתת לי את חיי, בעיניי דמעה, הלב בוכה בשקט, וכשהלב שותק, הנשמה זועקת. שמע ישראל אלוקיי, עכשיו אני לבד, חזק אותי אלוקיי, עשה שלא אבחר. הכאב גדול ואין לאן לברוח, עשה שיגמר, כי לא נותר בי כוח.
So, the idea of the song, which I find profoundly moving, is that once, oh, wait a minute.
And I'm personally
There's something acting up on my phone, on my computer. There we go. So one of the beauties that I see in this song is that it talks about the heart, the tears of the heart, and the heart crying. And it talks about, God, just listen to me. Just help me here. So once we get into the holidays, I think we should train ourselves to really speak to God from our heart. Let our heart cry out. Let our heart say, you know, dear God, give me the courage to let go, to let you in. Let me the courage to be different. Give me the courage to be different. I know you love me and I need your help. And with your help, I will find the purpose of my life. I will go back to being who I was supposed to be. Through tefillah, I will do tshuva, and I will return to being the person that you created me to be. So that's tefillah. And now we go into tzedakah. So you might be one of those, many of us are, who get really upset that every Yom Kippur they have appeals in synagogue, right? I mean, I feel very sorry for the rabbis and for the lay leaders who actually have to do the appeals. We all know why they have to do it on Yom Kippur, but it just feels something is wrong. What's interesting is that Jerusalem Talmud tells us that tzedakah is equal to all of the commandments in the Torah combined. Now, of course, the Babylonian Talmud says that the study of Torah is equal to all of the other commandments. But however, tzedakah is one of the very misunderstood commandments, mainly because of a translation problem. We usually associate tzedakah with charity. It is not, tzedakah is not charity. Charity comes from the Latin word caritas, and caritas basically means from the heart, right? That's the C-A-R that starts the words cardiologist and cardiogram and everything that has to do with the heart. So that's what charity is, something that comes from your heart. Tzedakah comes from tzedek, which is justice. These are very different things. Tzedakah is not generosity. You don't give tzedakah because you're nice. So why do we give tzedakah? So unlike some people who believe that if God makes somebody poor, that's probably because God wants that person to be poor, and most likely there is a reason why this person is being punished, Judaism teaches us that if there are poor people, if there is disgrace involved in poverty, this disgrace is society's disgrace, not a consequence of some original transgression or sin that that person did, not some metaphysical flaw on the part of that person. If somebody is poor, the cause is not theological, it is sociological. And the solution to that is in the hands of human society. So in the book of Dvarim in Deuteronomy, it says that there shall be no poor among you, which we know is not true. But then right after that, it says, for the Lord will surely bless you if you listen carefully to his words and do all of his commandments. And the rabbis say that this is exactly what God means. That if there's somebody poor, why does God say there's not going to be anybody poor? Well, because God expects society to take care of the poor. Judaism believes that the way in which we use our resources is one of the most important, tangible ways which we express our values, whether as a community or whether as an individual. And one of the vital ways that we can show where our priorities land is through tzedakah. When we give tzedakah, when we use our money and other material resources to touch the lives of others, we do not only help another person today, we are actually planting a seed. The impact of our tzedakah is felt both immediately and well into the future. And you will never know how many lives you have actually changed. An investment in justice, right, which is tzedakah, through touching another person's life in such a concrete way, pays dividends to all of us that have no limit. But tzedakah is much more than giving money. Done properly, tzedakah requires the person who is giving to share his compassion and his empathy, not just his money. So Maimonides says that whoever gives tzedakah to somebody with a sour face, even if he gives a lot of money, he has lost his merit. Because the way to give tzedakah is joyfully. It's not like, oh, I have to give. It's really being grateful that you have that opportunity to give to somebody else. Tzedakah is not only about helping other people in need, it also establishes yourself as the Torah asks us to do something and believes that by doing it, we become God's agents in this world. So when I give tzedakah to somebody, I'm helping not only that person, I'm also helping my relationship with God, because I'm saying to God, I see that there's something wrong in this world. And as an agent that you planted in this world, I am going to do something about it. I am going to represent you. It's through participation in tzedakah that we can really discover how much we can do for other people, how much we can change lives. By sharing our resources, we do what God did with us. God took this beautiful world, gave us the world, and said, here, I'm going to share it with you. We, being made in the image of God, can do the same thing by tzedakah. And giving tzedakah has two parts: the actual giving with a hand and the heart, right? Your relationship to that. So Judaism teaches us that the one who donates, the one who gives tzedakah, actually benefits more from giving tzedakah than the one who is receiving. Now, how can that be? And the answer is because the person that is receiving the money can use that money to buy material things. The person that is giving tzedakah actually has a little bit of a chance to see godliness. One of the Psalms basically says that through the righteousness of tzedakah, a person can actually see God. Now, it doesn't mean that you really see God, but it means that you see God in action. So tzedakah actually changes those who give more than those who receive. Our lives take new meanings when we realize how much we can help somebody else. Our ability to contribute to the world, to change lives, to actually touch the lives of other people and do something to make this world a better place is something that has absolutely no measure. It is just such a huge thing. Whereas the money that we're giving is limited, the reward is not. And I want you to think about something very interesting. Every time we do a mitzvah, and I'm using mitzvah not as a good deed, as a commandment, there is a bracha, a blessing that goes with it. So if we're going to light Shabbat candles, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, right? I mean, there's a blessing. Every mitzvah that we do, there's a blessing. We realize that there is no blessing when you give tzedakah. Now, why would that be? If it is a mitzvah, if it is a commandment that I have to give tzedakah, why is it that when I'm giving tzedakah, I don't say, blessed are you, Lord God of our universe, etc., who has commanded me to give tzedakah? And our rabbis explain that the reason why there is no blessing when you give tzedakah is that tzedakah is the blessing. And that's a beautiful thought. You don't need to say anything. Tzedakah itself is already that gift, that blessing. So there's a story about the Chafetz Chaim, and I'm all into stories, as you can see, that this man walks into his office, and the man was a very rich person who was very generous and gave a lot of money to a lot of different causes. And this man walks into the office of the Chafetz Chaim and says, I don't know what to do. And I don't know what to do because I've been getting more and more and more requests for tzedakah. It seems like everybody needs help, every organization. I'm getting knocks on my door every day. I don't know what to do. How am I supposed to do this? So the Chafetz Chaim turns to him and says, look, no person in this life is going to live in total tranquility without headaches, without worries. Everyone has some kind of problem that bothers them, whether it is difficult children or bills that they have to pay and don't have the money or illness. He says, aren't you lucky that your problem in life is that you are being pursued by charitable causes? And the guy says to him, thank you, Rebbe, and leaves. And he understood how important it was that for him to be able to give as well. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I don't believe that anything in the Hebrew language itself is a coincidence. The word to give in Hebrew is natan, and natan is spelled in a way that backwards or forwards, it actually reads the same way, right? It's nun, tav, nun. So whether you read it from right to left or left to right, it's still nun, tav, nun. And what our rabbis teach us is that the reason this is that way is because to give and to receive are equally important. Philanthropy is both things. It's both the giving and the receiving. The person that is receiving is also giving. It's giving the giver something. So now it should be easy to understand why I do believe that tzedakah is also one of the ways in which we can combat loneliness. When we can't meet in person, when we cannot physically touch others, it's even more important to find other ways to show our love, to show our concern for others, whether those we know personally or those we don't know. When we help somebody, we are no longer alone. So it's not only because we are going to, quote, see God's face, but because we touch a life. And when we touch a life, there is a bond that has been created, a relationship, a connection that is forever registered. Tzedakah, whether we realize it or not, is an incredible tool for lifting ourselves out of sadness and out of depression. You turn your focus away from yourself and you focus on somebody else. Lifting up a person, another person, is a remarkable tikkun, a remarkable fixing, a way to heal this world. It also has the potential to heal our own scars. When you feed somebody who's hungry, when you visit somebody who is ill, when you help a child who needs a mentor, you don't bring just healing to them. You create a complete a sense of self-worth to other people. And by doing that, you see yourself in a much different place. So this year, maybe more than ever before, we should remember that in the High Holy Day prayers, and specifically the Unetane Tokef, we speak about two apparently contradictory images. There is the great shofar that is sounded, and then there is the Kol Dmama Daka, the silent, still voice that is heard. Now, these seem to be two very different things. How can you have like the loud shofar and this delicate, silent voice? So we learn in Judaism that the shofar represents that loud awakening that we all need to hear, which is why we start listening to the shofar an entire month before Rosh Hashanah. And by the way, just as an aside, the blowing of the shofar has a parallel with tzedakah. I don't know if you know this, but there is no mitzvah, there is no commandment to blow the shofar. The commandment is to hear the shofar. So the person that actually is blowing the shofar is not fulfilling a commandment, but he or she is allowing everybody else to fulfill a commandment. So talk about giving, and your reward is not because you did a mitzvah. Your reward is that you allowed thousands of people to go through their mitzvah. So that's the point of the shofar, that loud awakening sound that says to you, please look around, notice what's broken in the world, notice what you can do. That's the loud voice, the loud sound. And then there is the silent voice. And that silent voice is what comes from within. That is the divine inside of each of us. That is the part of God that we all carry within us. That still voice, that calm voice, doesn't call to us in the same way as the loud shofar. It actually says to us, believe in yourself, believe that you can help others, believe that God can help you. It's the juxtaposition of these two different sounds, the strong shofar and this silent voice that comes from within, that really help us to notice what we need, who we are, and how we can help. So during these dark times that we've all been living through, when we look around us and there's so much brokenness in the world, there's so much pain, there's so much suffering, there's so much that is wrong, we are also called to look inside of our own selves and guide ourselves towards compassion towards our own selves, compassion for others, and compassion for this broken world. But compassion is not enough. Once we understand what it is that we need to do, we actually have to do it. We can bring a better world. I'm going to conclude with the words of all people, Quincy Jones. And I'm reading literally. I came to learn that the important thing is to get moving in a direction. You cannot wait until things are perfect. It's important to not sit back and wait for it. It likely will never come. You've got to look for it in other ways and other places. Just keep looking until you find a door of welcoming that's opening up. You may have to do some pushing to get it open all the way. And when it's open, walk on through. So my wish for 5781 is that we can all walk through together. We have each other. We have God. Just as we may not be able to tangibly feel God in our midst, this year, many of us will not even be able to tangibly feel others sitting next to us. But we are not alone. And Judaism gives us teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah to both make the harsh decree go away, but most important, assure ourselves and assure everybody else that we do not have to feel lonely. We are not alone. We are part of a community. And I believe that the next year, starting tomorrow night, is a year in which each and every one of us should say to God, I want to be a better person. Each and every one of us should say to God, I'm going to talk to you from the bottom of my heart and tell you, God, what I want, what I need, what I'm thankful for, what I'm upset about. And that we all will reach out to make sure that through our tzedakah, whether it is monetary or not, that we will make sure to let everybody know that there's not a single Jew in this world who should feel lonely. We are here for each other. That is my blessing for this year. And hopefully at the end of the year, we're going to look back and say, wow, we have accomplished so much in the human department. And Kim, I'll be more than happy to open for questions.
And I'll let you moderate that as well, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Anybody that has a question, you can feel free. Betsy, I see your hand up. Go.
Usually I try to add a question that I'm willing to, in my mind, accept whatever the response is. And this time, I'm not sure. So I want your opinion about speaking to God, that if God has created angels, but you choose to communicate with the angels, is that the same as speaking with God?
So Judaism does not believe in any kind of middleman, whether it is a human being or even angels. We believe that every person, or a priest, by the way, every person has equal access to God. So you don't need to pray to some other being. You can pray directly to the boss. Why would you talk to the secretary, right? The angels are secretaries.
If you feel, but what I'm asking, Sandra, is that there are two people that have left me from this world, and I feel strongly that my well-being and my needs and my joys, everything is shared with them and through them. But at the same time, I feel like it's also with God at the same time. But it's like that's the face that I put in my head when I have that experience.
So I'm happy you clarified your question because I understood something else originally. So let me go back. It is a very Jewish thing to pray at the graves of people who have left us, because there is a belief that people who are no longer in this world are actually closer to God, right? Closer in general, because their souls are back to where they came from. So talking to people and asking them for things in the belief that they can intercede with God to help us, that is a very Jewish thing. I had misunderstood your question originally, so thank you for clarifying. It's totally okay to do that.
Okay, so what I'm feeling is totally okay. Okay. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
What I understood when you said angels, and that's why I want to clarify something. We don't believe that people who are deceased are angels in the sense that there is an entity. There are angels like Gabriel, Michael. We have angels. Judaism believes in angels, but angels are beings that are not human, that God created, that can only do that which God tells them to do, meaning you can do what God tells you to do or not. The angels don't have that option. They only can do that. So when you first said the word angels, I was thinking in that sense. And in that sense, why would I want to talk to angels? I would much rather talk to God. But what you're saying is talking to people that were close to us and that are no longer in this world. And that is totally, totally acceptable. And a lot of people do that. So you're absolutely fine. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Annette, your hand is up.
Yes, I actually, when you were telling the first story with God, with the steps in the sand,
Yes.
I was thinking immediately about the fact that human is B'Tselem Elohim, and the word B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God has the word Tzel in it. But to have a shadow, you have to have light. So only when there is light, there is a shadow, and you appear as if you're two. But actually, when there is no light, you appear as one, but it's there still. So it's exactly the same image as in the steps, but with a shadow.
Right. And Annette, if I may build on what you just said, when you are one with the light, so if you think in terms of light and shadows, right? If I take a flashlight and I put it over an object, I will not see two things. I will only see one thing, depending on how the light, which is what Annette is saying, depending on how the light is shining, you actually see the person and the shadow. So you see two as opposed to only one. And that is exactly the idea of God being that light that we actually do need. Donna.
Thank you. I have a question regarding what you said about it took Abraham exactly 1 hour to miss the mark or sin, and then it took God an hour to forgive. What did Abraham do to receive
Adam.
God's forgiveness?
So it wasn't Abraham, it was Adam.
I meant
Right?
Adam.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So it's a good question. What did Adam do to receive God's forgiveness? And the reason I believe it's a very good question is because if we all remember the story, when God goes to Adam and says, whoa, you ate from that tree that I told you not to eat, the first answer was, that woman that you gave me made me do it. That's Adam's answer. It's not only blaming Eve, it's also blaming God, because he clearly says, the woman that you gave me, right? She made me do it. So the question then is, why did God forgive? And the answer is, that's why it took an hour. It could have been much faster. Had Adam immediately said to God, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done it, he would have been forgiven immediately. It took an hour because he didn't admit and just say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We all make mistakes in life. God would have understood that because God made us human with the choice or the ability to choose, and so we can make wrong choices. It took an hour because it took Adam an hour to basically recognize that it wasn't the woman that made him do it. He chose to do it. She didn't force
So are
him.
you saying that in life, our willingness to go inside and realize that we made a mistake and apologize, our forgiveness is in that moment? However long it takes for us to do that is up to us.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. I also want to point out, I don't know how many of you know this, because it's not usually shared, but one of the beliefs, now, when I say beliefs, can I prove it? No, nobody can prove it. It's all faith-based. But one of the beliefs is that the day that God forgives the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf was Yom Kippur. That's why this day, it was the 10th day of the month of Tishrei. And that is why the 10th day of the month of Tishrei is the holiday where it's considered the holiday of forgiveness. Because we know that even when the people did the stupidest thing ever, God forgave them on that day. So forgiveness is always around. I will also say that because we were created in the image of God, we have a responsibility, not to say obligation, to forgive those who have hurt us as well, provided, of course, that they recognize that they have hurt us and that they ask us to forgive them. But holding on to past grudges is not the right thing to do. If somebody hurt you, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and ask for forgiveness, it is our responsibility to forgive. It doesn't mean you now have to love the person. It doesn't mean you have to be best buddies, but it does mean that we have to let go. Because imagine if God did not let go of the things that we did that is not to his liking or that hurt him, none of us would ever be forgiven for anything, because we do things that are, not the way God wanted to be every day, which is normal. So we also have that responsibility to forgive those who generally come to us and ask for forgiveness. Anybody else? Okay.
There is there is the one that asked me if you would put the link for the song in the chat.
I can do that. Let me see how I can do that. Now, the song, as I said, there are many recordings of the song, and some are actually better than the one that I used. I used the one I chose for two reasons. A, because I like the fact that the translation is in big font so we can all read it. B, because I like the fact that it is clearly not coming from an Orthodox person. And you may have seen in the audience, there's every kind of person there. It's a song that speaks to any one of us. Yes, it talks about God, and yes, it talks about God, I'm crying out to you. I feel alone and I need your help. But that's not Orthodox. I just want everybody to understand that saying to God, I need your help and I'm here to tell you what I need, is non-denominational. So I put the link up, it's there. And you can find other recordings of the song. The song is called Kish, I'm writing it here, Halev, okay, When the Heart Cries.
Thank you. And
But the singer was Sarit Haddad?
Yes, that was Sarit Haddad, yes.
Okay.
so I guess we'll wind up, and on behalf of the entire community, we are delighted and excited to offer you the Mazal Tov, just a beautiful, beautiful blessing for the year. We are grateful to have you as our curriculum director and inspiration for the community. We love that we have you on board month after month, and that we get to be the community that you can experiment with. And we hope that we'll always be your home community.
Absolutely.
If this is your first time visiting IJKL and you registered and paid for this program, I encourage you to utilize that donation for an October class pass. Try out our programming included with what you offered today to be here. Sandra's back on the schedule for us in October. There's all kinds of fabulous, amazing programming. IJKL is offering high holiday programming above and beyond the Yontif. And we encourage everyone to support their synagogues, be with your synagogue. But if on the second day you want a different experience, pop in. If you aren't already registered, the secret to get the link, there's an ability to make an $18 donation. And if you make that, it will give you the link. If you've already registered, you can, I don't have to record this, especially since it's secret.